The steeper path, the climb I choose, leaving comfort, nothing to lose. Through shadow trails and rocky ground, my purpose clear, my meaning found. Each step I take brings strength anew. Challenges faced, resilience grew. A journey tough, but richly sweet, where soul and life's alignment meet. At peaks ahead, the vision clear, my greatest goals becoming near. The steeper path, though hard and slow, is where my truest self will grow. The steeper path.
There's a high resolution and a low resolution version of the story. But I was in college and I really played guitar growing up, and I grew up in Minnesota. And so when and then I thought I was going to go to college to play guitar. And then I visited a bunch of schools. I actually thought I wanted to go to Manhattan School of Music and went there. I think this is going to be higher resolution. Maybe I thought when I started, if that's okay. We're on a podcast, right? So I went to Manhattan School of Music and a lot of other schools. And at Manhattan School of Music, I got like the flu. So I was in the, uptown there where Manhattan School of Music is near Columbia or something. And I was sick in a like weird apartment building and also got a real taste for how difficult it is to make it as a guitar player in New York and how good everybody was. So for whatever reason, the experience I had at Manhattan School of Music or Manhattan Institute of Music, didn't work out the way I expected it to. So I sort of got cold feet and then visited other schools and went to Skidmore College and just found that everybody there played in a band. Everybody there was sort of, a hybrid person like me, where they had some academic stuff going on and a lot of creative things. And just in the way that when I went to Manhattan, I think it's Manhattan School of Music. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on the name of this very prestigious music school for jazz studies, which I'm glad I didn't get a degree in. Even just saying it now, what a mistake that would have been. I'm glad I got the flu. But so I went and majored in government at Skidmore instead and played in bands. And then at that point, being a guitar player, we did, we actually started a group that was, this is very, very early at that point in time. But if you remember the Brand New Heavies,
absolutely,
and the Heavy Rhyme Experience, we did something very similar to that. We had a live band, and we had 3 rappers, and had a lot of success at college playing rap music and playing guitar in a band. And then in the course of discovering all that music, got involved and excited about all the sort of records that they were using to sample to make the new hip hop records. And started looking at collecting those records, and then had a girlfriend I was dating at the time who lived in Brooklyn. So I started coming to New York City on the weekends, and I saw Mark Ronson and Stretch Armstrong, and these were sort of these relatively nerdy white guys playing in the hottest clubs in New York. And at that point in time, only Stretch was playing at the hottest clubs, but Mark was someone that was sort of, a friend of friends from another college where, wherever he would be playing, there'd be other people that went to Vassar, where I think he went to school, who would be like, oh, we're going to Now Bar or some spot to see Mark Ronson. And then he'd be like, oh, wow, maybe this is something that I could do. And so I started collecting records and thinking about playing records. And then when I was getting ready to graduate from school, I actually got involved in the internet. So it was very new at that particular point in time. And they had some, I don't remember what it was like, but classes in the computer lab where they teach you like Gopher. I don't know, is that's right, if you remember that? And
this green screen terminal stuff FTP to do research.
And a little HTTP. And so I went to work as I guess when you're after your junior year or something like that, you go and get an internship. So I was trying to figure out where I could get an internship. So I applied for one at MTV and, managed to by hook or crook get an internship there. And then when I went there, this part I'll keep sort of at a higher level, but I at that point in time, given the you could even probably guess, where do I want to work when I go to MTV? Like MTV Raps, MTV Raps. And I was sort of talked out of it by the people there, and they said, "Oh, you don't want to work on MTV Raps. You're not going to like it." And maybe you should try this new thing we have called Online, where we had a deal where they just done a deal with America Online, and so I went and. Well, no, I'm sorry. There's one skip step here. So they said, no, you don't want to do MTV Raps. You're really one of our star interns. We're sending you to the Beach House. And so I went to the MTV Beach House, which was in Quag. Yeah, and it was amazing. And this is a true story. Like, it was actually, like, I thought my parents had gotten me a studio apartment for the summer. And here they were going to ship me out to the Hamptons for the summer. And it was literally, providing suntan lotion to supermodels on the beach, because you're really just a PA. So you have talent that needs to be moved over from the hotel and writing. It was just, it felt like it was too good to be true. And my Protestant work ethic at that point, which still existed, kicked in. And I said, this doesn't feel right, guys. I'm out here on the beach with Daisy Fuentes. My parents got me an apartment in the summer for the summer in the city, and here I am on the beach. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel like I'm getting everything out of it. They're like, well, all right, if you want something more boring, we have this thing called Online that you could try. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like the kind of thing that my parents could get behind more than whatever's going on out here out on the beach. Which, for better or worse, that's the call that I made. Again, it's weird to think at the time how maybe that wasn't the right move, but there was really 3 people at that time working on their entire digital business, and so I started building content for keyword MTV on America Online, and then went back to school. And at that point, 3 people, they realized quickly, wasn't enough to run their digital business. They need more people involved. So I was able to work while I was at school and just, building their database of record stores and music venues. It was very, very early days. And so I would just do research for them from school. And then right when I went graduated from school, I started working there the Monday after graduation. So, it was actually an amazing time. We built, it was like, the things that now are sort of, maybe part of internet mythology. There was the time when we realized that we needed a website, and that would be mtv.com. And Adam Curry, the digital OG and MTV VJ, had actually bought the MTV domain name, and they had to go get it. And then, even just on and on, just every sort of dumb thing that digital businesses tried and had some success with. And then obviously MTV had a great brand at that point, and great content and access and these tentpole events. And so over time, who did we eventually buy? The Sonic. Do you remember this digital? If I could just remember the Sonic State, or so, what was the name of the other? There was another big digital music business that was Sonic something that they acquired, and that was sort of when I spun off, and I eventually went to work for Paper Magazine, which is a great, amazing experience. Again, like just an amazing place. Kim and David, amazing bosses. Just the people coming in out of the office, the entire cast of the movie Kids was like interns, and, would just be different fashion designers, photographers, bell hooks to Todd Oldham to Nick Waplington to Run DMC to Beck to Lil, you name it. Like they were really so well connected, and it was a very, very, from the art direction, everything about that place was amazing. And then I think somehow from there I went back to MTV. I sort of got disgruntled at MTV and left, and then they lured me back. And then I started booking interviews there and got more involved in, the syndicated radio side of the business as well as the digital business. And then from there, really developed my relationships with artists and labels. And then at that point in time, some of the stuff, there was UBO. I don't know if you remember Urban Box Office.
Oh yeah.
And then there was another thing, AKA, which was started by a consortium of label executives, kind of headed up by Steve Rifkin from Loud Records, and a bunch of other industry executives, I think, kicked in some money to build sort of an internet portal. And it was an ad network, and we sort of had, built up relationships with all the early big rap, websites that were starting, All Hip Hop and Hip Hop DX and hiphopsite.com, all these sort of, 88 Hip Hop, if you remember that goes with these really sort of forgotten destinations, because all these platforms sort of blacked out the ability for these other independent destinations that people went to online. They're all sort of forgotten now and replaced by YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. But at that point, I developed all these relationships with the outlets, and then all these relationships through the consortium of industry executives that funded that business, started to develop relationships with the artists and the labels. And so from there, somehow was brought to Jay-Z. And I think through Def Jam and through the relationships I had there, they needed a digital person for Roc-A-Fella. Mm-hmm. So that was the next stop for me. And then spent several years there. And then Jay was eventually, there was sort of the breakup of Jay and Damon at Roc-A-Fella, and which I had a very unique perspective on, because I wasn't, a lot of people there were people that they grew up with or knew for a long time, right. Or if they didn't, they had some pre-existing relationship with Jay or Damon. And there were sort of Jay's people and Damon's people. Some people were both Jay and Dame's people, but everyone sort of had some longer term connection to either one of those guys, where I was really just a guy brought in to help grow their digital business and didn't have any family ties to either one of those guys. So as that business fell apart, as they broke up their business and their relationship on a business level disintegrated, I was kind of stuck in the middle of it. And it was an incredibly interesting time and crazy as that sort of spun into the stratosphere in different directions, all the artists and all the different businesses and the business relationship. And then Jay actually went to become the president of Def Jam. So they brought me in to head up the digital business at Def Jam. So I went with him. And so during the time that he was at Def Jam, I was in charge of the digital business there. And then at the end of that time, by the end of Jay's time at Def Jam, I was associated with him. So by the end of it, so when he left Def Jam, I think, they were happy for me to, that at that point I was connected enough with him that they were like, okay, Jay's leaving, now it's your time. And then at that point, I don't know if you remember John Bongiorno, who,
of course,
who passed away, and who became one of my best friends and a real friend to our family and my wife. And he never got to meet our son, actually, sadly enough, but he recruited me for Nokia. And if you remember too, he was such a guy who was cut from a very different cloth than Larry. You and I probably have a certain amount in common, and you and I might be two of the more, I don't know what the right word would be to, like, it wasn't, there were a lot of pretty square people there. I don't know how else to put it, right? Like,
I mean, it was a European hardware manufacturing company that's hundreds of years old, and that place was cut from a cloth of making things on high volume and high scale. It's disciplined, it's operations, it's traditional. It's from a different culture. Well, and then you bring in people from the internet, from Silicon Valley, from music into that culture, you're going to stand out.
Yeah, and it was Finnish, right? So not even European. Having worked in other European businesses, the Spanish ones are different from the
Oh, yeah.
UK and the German. That's what I will get into later on, as as I move to Europe. Each different European country, especially from a work perspective, has their own cultural perspective on getting stuff done, and the Finns have their own unique way of doing things, and it's sort of quiet and serious and thoughtful. And the record business, Damon Dash is not any of those things.
He's the opposite of Finland, if there was one.
And John Bongiorno was some kind of a hybrid guy where he could bring people like us into that business, and they were interested in getting people like us involved. So I got recruited to work there, and spent and then I guess this part, I'm not entirely. I'm trying to think. I wind up going to Telefónica via my friend Jamie Finn, who never worked at. He was at Ericsson, I believe, and then so I got recruited, I believe, from Nokia to work at Telefónica, and then at that point relocated to London, spent a few years living there, and then that was a very similar experience to what happened at Nokia, where Nokia was that sort of traditional hardware business trying to figure out how to grow their digital business. The record company was the same way, where they were this traditional hardware business trying to figure out how to navigate the world of software. Nokia tried the same with varying degrees of success, and then Telefónica was the exact same. It was Telefónica Digital, and they had these different, big data. They were kind of trying to leverage the data within the organization. All these sort of, running services. Of course, the new, they had all these issues with the OTT messaging apps cannibalizing their core messaging business, and maybe we could build apps so that everyone in Argentina isn't using WhatsApp instead of using our messaging gateway, and then ran into very similar challenges where, I would say that the challenge that we faced at Nokia was a little bit that there were these incentives that existed around the business that really revolved around selling hardware. And then it was hard to get people to focus on driving the digital business if they were being incentivized to sell the hardware or other products and services. I don't know what, but you got the feeling as you went around to different markets that there were sometimes people being incentivized different ways that didn't always align with the digital business. And then had a very similar experience at Telefónica, where it was driving adoption of these digital businesses, but going to that example where, and the facts and figures could be a little bit off, but I believe at that time in Argentina, 98% of messaging was done via WhatsApp, and it was killing their text messaging business. We built a competing messaging app, and then would try and go and pitch it to these markets, and they were actually still being incentivized on the messaging. So they would be, why would we ever, we're still getting paid from the messages that go through the gateway. And we understand that WhatsApp is killing our business, but we don't get our bonus unless we hit these other metrics. So, went through that sort of same, hills and valleys process of trying to scale the digital business within that traditional mobile operator environment, similar to the digital businesses that we worked on, and that hardware business at Nokia. And then when that ended, that role, I got moved back on a very luxurious way, just as the way I was moved over there back to New York, and then had to figure out what to do next. So this goes back 10, 12 years. And so I started trading at that time, and I've been trading on my own with my own account ever since. And then this year, I started trading through a broker dealer, and have had some ups and downs there, and continue to work in music. And I guess over that same period of time, I guess I traded for a long time by myself. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the book Market Wizards, but it's a lot of people who are trading use those books to it's kind of like there's the Passman book that everyone reads for the music business. These Market Wizards book are unique in that they're really just looking at traders that have really strong track records. And if you read those books, you'd be struck that none of those people, or the vast majority of them, haven't taken sort of traditional paths like the business majors I went to in college in terms of approaching finance. A lot of times they're developing the strategies and stuff on their own. And so I kind of struck out on a similar path and had some mixed results, you know what I mean? And then at the end of that decade, I really miss working with other people, and I never wanted to be sort of this lonely, person developing these trading strategies by myself and slowly running out of capital. And it became a big struggle for me and not necessarily as good of a fit for how I saw myself, even though I'm super passionate about financial markets and the trading. And I always had been. So it's funny that we come to this part where I pick up the trading, but I was always involved in the stock market from a young age. It was something that my grandfather kind of put me up on, and then my father as well. And so I always was, managing my own account in the background and always reading books on finance in the background, but took it more seriously about 10 or 12 years ago. And maybe took it too seriously, sort of wound up lost in the wilderness, so to speak, in my own sort of world where I wasn't connected to anything and didn't feel good about myself, because you really need, for me at least, like, I love to work with other people. I love to collaborate with people, hear what they're interested in, and I love to help people. And so I kind of felt like isolated, and that even though I was passionate about what I was doing, there's a big part of who I am and how I wanted to contribute to the world and how I wanted my career to evolve that I wasn't making progress in. So at the same time, I'd also, always collected records and played records. And when I went to London, I DJ'd a little bit, but was just busy working and, managing people in other parts of Europe and traveling for work and trying to get people to, incentivize their consumers in Mexico or other parts of the world to use the products. And then when I came back to New York and felt like I wanted to kind of re-engage with the world a little bit, I started playing records. And at the same time, I started maybe slowing down a little bit as the DJing transitioned from the vinyl to the computers. And then it was sort of convenient. I have a lot of records, and I was selling the records, and I've always enjoyed the records because I've always enjoyed kind of finding, digging for records and buying records cheap and discovering them, and had a lot of records that I appreciated and value. And then it was always great to be able to play the records and get paid. And then the next phase 2 was sort of, wow, I got paid to play these records, and now I'm selling them and people are buying them from me and I'm getting paid again. Although it's not enough to live on necessarily, but it felt like it's nice to be able to like play the records over and over again and get paid each time and then sell them and get paid again. I was like, wait, maybe I actually could go and get paid to play the records again before I sell all of them. So I just started popping up places and asking if I could play records, and that has gone really well. And also streaming online. So I did that too, sort of realized, wow, my mixer had been broken. So I was also kind of like, I wasn't even able to DJ for several years. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get it. I found a mixer in the storage that wasn't broken, so I plugged that in, and then was like, wow, what if I just plugged the webcam in? And then saw all these people, especially in New York. There's so many different vinyl bars. It's ridiculous. There's like vinyl steakhouse. There's just a million different there's kids parties with vinyl. It's just like vinyl. And so I really enjoyed playing records for people. And then, I played 2 times this week out in clubs at night. And then one time I did this taping for a sort of more promo streaming kind of thing on Sunday. And then I sell records every day, and really enjoyed all the. And then I meet a lot of people. I've made a lot of friends through social media that are also interested in the music. And then it's been great. It's been a nice experience. And then I don't know where that's going to go. And sometimes I'm in that same mode now again, where I'm really caught up in some of the day-to-day stuff I need to do, just like I used to be back in the day, and then not maybe putting as much effort as I could into especially getting work as a DJ. You know, some of the spots that I want to play, I'm playing a place next week called Mr. Mellow. That's really nice, like a really nice setup and a really like more competitive spot to get booked. And I have a great relationship with the guy Nate that runs the spot, and I've played there a bunch of times, but it's very competitive. And so the only reason I'm playing there next Wednesday, but the only reason is because I went to the gig the last Wednesday and he was there, and I was like, "Oh, Nate," you know, and he was like, "Oh, I'll book you to play." I was like, I wanted to come in, and I also want to stop by places. You don't want to just like fly in with an email. It's good to support these venues and show up and say hello and have a cocktail and see how things are going. And so I always feel like a little bit of a jerk, just like emailing people when I'm not like a person who's showing up and doing the politics and socially networking in real life. So, that's been going well, but I'm also at that point now kind of getting pulled in a lot of different directions and, feeling like I might be not doing enough or not doing it, or maybe I should do it less and focus more on the finance. I don't even know. I feel like I'm getting pulled in a lot of different directions these days.
That's interesting. It's an interesting tension because you have options, and not a lot of people have these type of options. And whenever you have options, you have choices to make. And so I'm curious about where the passion comes from in both of these parts of you, because there's a part of you that is super interested in stock trading and financial markets and figuring out how to crack a system and problem solving. And then there's another side of you that's interested in music and helping people have a good time, cut loose, enjoy themselves, experience the culture. And they're clearly two very different parts of you. Which part speaks to what part of you, and how do you balance that out?
I think it's different. Well, and this is something that I struggled a little bit thinking about like what we were going to talk about and then how I was going to explain myself. But one of the challenges that I face is that I don't really know people in finance. I don't know how it is for we have had similar career paths a little bit. Yeah. And then there are people who are really finance bros or whatever.
It's a lifestyle. It's a
genre, right? That we can, we can see when we close our eyes, like who's the finance dude. And then I don't know if it's like that for you, but I really don't know those people. I got to be honest. I wish I
don't
did.
Either.
I went to school with a lot of them and was friends with a lot of them, but don't have that's not my strength. I actually have a great network of people that I know and people like yourself who I have good relationships with, and haven't always have been like somebody who I think tried to cultivate good relationships with people and show up, and it's like this thing. I had something for you, and I know that I want to be on time, and we had our little technical difficulties, but I like to be like showing up for people, and then sometimes when I'm dealing with the finance, I just don't have the ability to tap into other people and help me navigate. But when I think about the things that I do, it's all somewhat connected in that it's funny too, because I think a lot about, I buy and sell records all the time. Right. And there's a lot of similarities, even in terms of, I just don't see those two. I definitely have my own issues in terms of like, wait, I don't know people that work in that business. I don't feel like I'm that type of person if I think about the type of people that do work in that business. But when I think about what I do and who I am, there's really like all this continuity that exists between, one of the things that I would just use as an example is that, I focus on price when it comes to the markets and the stock, so I'm not as interested in trying to figure out why things are happening. Right, I'm really watching price, And then a lot of times, I would say on the one hand, people who are moving the price know more than you or I do. And you need to have a lot of capital to move the price of Apple stock, and then at that point you need to have actually made a lot of right decisions to get to the place where you have the amount of capital that you can actually move the price of the stock. So at that point, you're dealing with people that have more information and are doing more homework. And then I'm just not that guy. I'm not a guy who builds business model, and we knew those guys too. And I don't know if I'm not an Excel guy. I had a guy that would run the build the formulas and the reports and so forth. And I love to look at the information. I love to look at the data. I love to work with the analysts to come up with, here's how the report should look. Here's what these different customers want to see. Here's what the trends that we see and what it all means. But I really don't know Excel. And so I focus on price. And I guess the analogy I'm going to make is that with records, there's a lot of times when, like this record right here, put it on the shelf. Like this record is expensive. I discovered yesterday, it's like $75. And then I threw it on, and my wife was like really annoyed. And then now I'm struggling, but I like it. You know what I mean? And then it's like when the bunch of things happen there. It's like, you see, oh, I like this when I throw it on, and then she instantly doesn't like it. So I think it's worth less at that point. And then I look it up. I'm like, oh, it's worth like $100 or whatever, $75.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now I like it more. And then, but with the record, right? Like once I see that it's worth $75, I might spend some time, but I'm not going to spend too much time thinking about why. This is the price. It's rare. It's a record that there's a certain amount of, there's some balance that's been struck between supply and demand, and it's worth more. Oh, this has been deemed a valuable record more than most of them, Right. And so when we look at the records, we don't spend as much time thinking about like, oh, what are the exact supply? What are the mechanics of why this record is 70 and this one's 12, like,
right.
It has to do with things that we don't care about, but we're able to look and navigate the records based on, like, we see things that have certain characteristics. It's like, if I see another record that's on that label with, Jimmy Heath in particular, like, people like it, people want it, right? So I tend to, for better or worse, for me, a big part of it, because I'm not good at Excel, is behavioral economics. And my favorite book is I've seen people trash this book lately. So now, they've sort of trashed Danny Kahneman, like they've trashed our friend Ty Lopez. I saw some, they trash everybody. I'm like, the book thing. I don't know if you've heard of the book Thinking Fast or Thinking Slow.
I have it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really one of my favorite books of all time. And it helps me understand how to navigate. That's really the framework that I'm more interested in. Looking at how humans behave. I'm assuming the price is the price. There's some really smart individuals looking at those details and coming up with and calculating the price. But I'm more interested in trying to take advantage of some of the human frailty and things, confirmation bias and anchoring and one of the things that and then for me, these things are applicable in the market as well as all other areas. Like one of the main things from that book that I always think about a lot, that is, again, some of these things, like, they're statistically proven to be true, but I have no idea how the math works behind it. But that, like, things are never as important as they seem when you're thinking about it, which, that's the type of rubric, whatever you want to, some framework that exists that I apply that in all areas of my life. But there's many times, especially with trading, where it comes in especially good use, because you can have a trade that goes against you. And it's really, I guess it's where you find out that it's really true, that, like, the thing that's worrying you the most is maybe the thing that's going to worry you the least the next day. I can say on a practical level, I've been short Tesla, and it's been hurting me, and it's been really going against me for like 120 $20, something like that. It only goes up, and no one. And again, it's a perfect example of like no one's really exactly clear why. And then, in fact, yesterday they report their sales numbers, and they went up a little bit. Which everything eventually has to go. When it goes down, what goes up must go down, or whatever they say like that. Right. So what goes down must go up a little bit at some point. And then at that point, of course, I'd just been complaining to my friend the day before, who I talked to a little bit about his portfolio and stuff. I sent him the chart of the Tesla, like this is just before they report the numbers. And I was like, this guy it's killing me, and I was worried about it and complaining about it. And who can I share this with and show that this is bothering me and I'm worried about it? And then, of course, then the next day, this was going back to yesterday, this was earlier in the morning, so I kind of lost track of it. They report the numbers and they're up 7% or something like that on the month. And the stock goes up, another 3%. And it's like, oh, here we go again. Yeah, I'm going to lose money again with this guy. And then on the one hand, it's like, that it gives you an indication that there are some people out there that were smart enough to know that, that he can only go down 30% month over month in Europe for so many months before there's where it's easy to go up 7, right? You go down 30, what's left? Like you can go up 7 as easy at that point because you're only selling 4 cars, so only sell 2 more or something like that.
Right.
So, there's smart people out there that this was priced in, right? Whatever the 7% bump in sales. So I'm looking at it. And again, now I'm really upset. Here I'm losing again. And then, of course you can already guess like what happened yesterday. It went down 5%, so there's sort of that perfect rule that you can apply to all different areas of your life, but you can really sort of taste it when you're dealing with the stock market. And so for me, I'm not sure where that's going to lead for me, but I've gotten really comfortable being in those uncomfortable situations. And I've been so far, one of the things that's from the Danny Kahneman book that I always think about, because I'm really like a caveman lawyer, and back in Phil Hartman on Saturday Night Live, back and maybe dating myself, but he would come and he'd be like, I'm just a caveman, but there's one thing I do know. And then he launched into, I'm really like caveman trader, where planning fallacy is another concept from the Danny Kahneman book, which I'm, where in these rooms where people make a plan, and I'm sure how this works. We're gonna roll out this new product. Here's the fucking plan, right? I'm sorry, and here's what we're going to deliver, and we're going to go up. Here's the channels that we have. We can just put it on the home screen of the phone, and then think of that's the plan. And then we're going to, of course, we're going to lead ourselves to the promised land, and then invariably there's no other destination. It's a plan that marches you towards the promised land, so invariably there's no real sort of contingency planning that even takes place. And invariably you wind up in the place that the contingency plan would have taken you had you taken the time to think about, wait, how can this go wrong? And where will we wind up when they do go wrong? And in meetings, in the context, I'm sure you can remember, so I certainly remember it from Nokia, that being an issue, where there would be a plan, there would be this fallacy that's sitting there in the middle, the elephant in the room, what things that could go wrong. Everyone around the room in the back of mind sort of knowing each different area that they have the expertise to identify what could go wrong. And then absolutely not one slide in the PowerPoint ever thinking for one
would acknowledge it.
Anything that could go wrong. And then, coming back to the market or life, right? Like there's so much that you can harness there, I think, in terms of like, now, I don't know if I do ever wind up back in these meetings, that's really my question that I think about, that I throw back to you, is like, those concepts, I'm not sure, for me, you're much better at winding up hitting the target if you acknowledge planning fallacy and come up with the contingency plan. And even more so now than ever, I'm not sure if having the experience and the knowledge I have now would have benefited me in those conversations, in those rooms, because it seems to me that planning fallacy is sort of baked in. And I don't know, maybe it's different now in the corporate halls, but that's the type of thing that I wonder about, like, as I do start to think about segueing back into the traditional work world, is like, is anyone going to want to hear about planning fallacy, or will I be better off just sitting on my hands and just pretending like the promised land is the only destination?
It's a great question. I mean, what do you think is behind that blind spot? I mean, I have my own theories, but what do you think is behind that blind spot with the planning fallacy with people?
Oh, for me, I think it's real. I mean, this is just my experience. You could tell me what your thoughts are. Is that, well, this goes back to the same exact thing. So this is why everything for me, I think I'm answering your question in the most roundabout way possible, but how it's all connected to me in that, for me, when I think about the market, it's all about being humble and being agile, So wherever those words like nimble and agile, there's some like catchy catchphrase there. But it's like, it's kept me humble. It makes me humble. Just that situation I described with Tesla over the last 48 hours has humbled me. I'm humbled in ways I never, it just keeps me super humble. It's made me like the most humble guy you might talk to. It's really beat me down in a way that I don't have the hubris that I think exists in some of those conversations. And then when I think about sometimes people in leadership roles at some of these bigger organizations, the last thing that you would think about would be them they're neither humble nor agile. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is, as you become more and more successful in some of these organizations, and maybe and then those are those people, right, like that are the special leaders that exist, that if you can rise to the C-suite and actually be humble and agile, those are really special leaders. But I would say that those two qualities, which to me are really the most, and especially in the world that we live in today, that humility and the agility are like so important just to be successful in life in so many different ways. And it's sort of that I love to be wrong. And that's really how I am. Like, I love for somebody to show up and be like, no, this is wrong. This is how you should do it for reasons X, Y, and Z. And that to me is a win. And I don't know, it doesn't necessarily always feel like that in the meeting rooms. The bigger the organization gets, the less it feels that way to me, in my experience,
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I think there is a certain amount of ego that feeds into the modern vision of leadership, that there's the idea that leaders know things, that leaders have a plan, that plans are grounded in being right. And that if you have a plan and you are in charge, then you're doing the thing that leaders are supposed to do. Everybody go this way, right? And that ego can cloud, or that archetype expectation that if you're the leader of a group of people or a product or a plan, that somehow, you're by definition of being in that job, you are qualified to be right. And that is where the key words that you mentioned, humility and agility, fall out of the room, right? It's like, if you think that being a leader means being right always and being in charge, knowing the direction, setting a heading, and you don't understand that humility and agility come with it, you're going to drive everybody off of a cliff, right? And I see so many people in business who believe that driving and action are the most important things. Just do. Doesn't matter if we're doing the right thing. Just keep doing. And there's such a bad name and such a bad connotation given to being thoughtful, reflective, slowing down, stepping back, or acknowledging what can go wrong. Just even acknowledging what can go wrong is taboo in some cultures.
Yeah, you could wind up. I mean, really, come on. Let's be honest. That's gonna and again, there's my experience with this is really antiquated, but that you're going to be in big trouble if you approach things the way that you just described. Other people are going to see it as a sign of weakness.
Yes.
And they're going to try and explain, looks like I can definitely roll over this guy and I'll be running the next meeting, right? Like
Totally. I've seen this so much, especially with people who are successful. If they become very successful, they often lose sight of the fact of the truth of why they were very successful. And
yes,
they kind of like drift away from it and think that they did something special, right? Or they are something special. But usually, like, the thing that made somebody successful, you didn't actually control.
Yeah, that's a very Danny Kahneman approach. You know, like there's he talks a lot about, fighter pilots and, coaching and, you know, coaches believing their sort of pep talk is the thing that's leading the team to victory, and luck having a huge component, and
chance, luck.
Yeah.
Being at the right timing, being at the right place at the right time.
Yes.
So if you look at our shared experience at a place like Nokia was the most important mobile phone manufacturer in the world up until about 2007, 2008.
Right when we showed up, basically, right when we rolled out the door.
When the iPhone and Android hit the world, the rules changed. The playing field fundamentally changed. But there was this perception inside of the company that because we had created a market out of nothing, that we could continue to drive that market forward. That, like, the playbook that was there would continue to apply. And there was a real lack of humility that the idea that the playing field could change, right? So I see this over and over again. I mean, I saw it throughout my corporate career that people think because you did one thing that led to a success, somehow it was going to continue. You have this magic playbook, this magic formula, and I think it applies to a lot of the big companies. Sometimes they get a second act, like Microsoft was heading off of a cliff in terms of irrelevancy because Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates started to believe that, the same plan that got them there was going to get them to where they were going in the future, which was build, an ecosystem and lock everybody into it and create a walled garden, and the carriers thought that, that if they built a walled garden, they could control everything. And the mobile phone companies thought that. And then Apple and Google come in and change everything, right? Same thing happened in music. We saw that happen with the labels, right? They thought they had everything under control. They were the entire funnel and that they had the magic formula. And then boom, Kazaa happens, Napster happens, and before you know it, the whole game has changed. And so, I think it's really important to think about like this humility and agility thing. And that's why I'm glad you brought it up, because it's like when you're trying to figure out your own path and your own game, you can't believe you know where you're going to end up. That the path you were on is the one that you were going to stay on. That you know the formula, right? And I think that's what I appreciate about what you're going through right now is you're experimenting with different paths and different formulas.
Yes. But I'd be the first one to say I'm staying very humble and very agile. I have to say, like,
Absolutely.
It's that part of
that's
it.
What's working.
I feel like that's the one area where I've really rounded out my resume in the humility and agility department. But I'd be the first one to say I don't have any kind of clue as to where this is going. And even for me, I'm guilty of that a little bit, in that and I think it's just a symptom of where I'm at in the career, the arc of a person's life and career. Is that there have been these things that have like clicked for me for a long period of time, and I'll be the first one to admit that right now I haven't quite found that it hasn't clicked for me yet, and I'm guilty in the same way of sort of we're like, oh wait, someone's gonna pop up, and and time again, things have just happened for me like that in a positive way. Where it's like, Mom, what about the beach house? oh, well, there you go. Like that. Now you're ringing. Oh, what about Jay-Z? You know, like here we got this guy,
Yeah.
Kanye West, you know, and what if we moved you to London? You know, and I got to admit, at this point, I'm a little bit figuring out and waiting to see exactly what that next, you know, where that next opportunity is going to present itself, and have been a little bit guilty of my own planning fallacy in that, you know, I've decided to kind of, you know, stake out on my own, trying to figure out things in a way, but where, you know, so like, and come on, look at the way that the internet presented itself, and
For
the
real.
way that, you know, all these different things, the phone, you know, believe me, when I saw the phone, it was just like, oh, the phone, you know, I remember so long ago, you know, like seeing in circles, I can't remember where it was, but it was all these other people from sort of more, maybe it was that when I was at Nokia, I don't know, but it was like, you know, people time and time, oh, apps is a fad, you know, come on, even going back to art, you know, like the phone, you know, really that to me, the internet first as a way to, you know, discover music, which is what I was passionate about, and was from where I grew up, there was a ton of great music that just wasn't made available to me because of the way that the world was structured at that time.
Yeah.
And growing up in Minnesota like I did, and then the phone was the same kind of thing where I've sort of always had these, you know, we've lived in this time where there have been these interesting new transformational technologies that have presented themselves and said, oh, here's the opportunity, run with it. And then I'd be the first one to admit over the last, I'm working on it and not haven't completely fallen off the mat, but I'm struggling a little bit to figure out like, where's that next hook going to come from?
Where's
you know?
the next thing?
Yeah, where's sort of the opportunity, and then also like the business trajectory. And, you know, here's someone who's like, hey, we have this new thing we're trying to figure out, and we need you to get involved. So I've kind of struck out on my own in an independent way, but I'll be the first one to admit that I haven't had that same whatever that moment where the lightning strikes and everything all comes together. You know, and again, I'm as guilty of my own planning fallacy in that I still believe that my time is coming. You know, but I may be just.
I think it's okay to believe that. I think it's the hard part is to get too attached to one version of what that looks like when your time comes and how it's going to come about. And I think back to like both you and I share something in common in that we kind of, well, we share a lot in common, but in our beginning of our career stories, we both fumbled into career through what was happening around us and just trying things and putting ourselves in situations where possibilities could happen. Like, you know, because of our age group, I think we're probably about the same age. I'm 52, going to be 53 soon.
52, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm, you know, when we went into college, this is 90 through 94, 95 time frame, the internet, the web and the internet started to just really happen. And I didn't go to school to be involved in the internet or computers at all. I was not interested in them at all. I came to computers through art.
Me too. Exactly. Yes. Absolutely.
I wanted to use computers because I saw them as creative tools. I saw that you could make art with them. And that's where I came onto it. And then it became sort of like, well, you know how to do this, then you can easily build a website. And if you know how to build a website, then you could also do these other things. And I kind of, my whole career was an accident from stepping into an art show on campus at school and seeing the art and saying, how the hell did you guys make this? And then the person was like, we made them with computers. And I was like, you can do this with computers? I want to do this, right? So my whole career stepped out of like me saying, ooh, I'm open-minded. This is cool. I want to try it. I didn't have a clear plan for what I wanted to do after I graduated. I didn't really know what I would want to be when I grew up, but I just was experimental and I just tried things. And then I just kept trying things. It was like a jungle gym or like monkey bars. It was like going from one rung to the next. And they took me to all kinds of, and you as well, to all kinds of crazy places. And we got hours of stories about where it took us and the people we met and the things we did. But we didn't have a plan. We had an intention, right? Like the intention was a relatively low bar, like not live at home with my mom and dad. not be broke, have fun, pay the bills,
and be involved in music
involved in music. Yeah. I mean, I played in bands, you played in bands. I wanted to just be able to do cool things and hang out with interesting people. And the key was putting ourselves in situations where possibilities can happen. It wasn't a plan. It was a feeling or an intention or being there for the moment. And when we're older, we fall for that planning fallacy too. We kind of end up in that place of like, oh, well, I need to now figure out how to find the next big thing and latch onto it. Or I need to get my timing right again. But we're not close enough to what's happening out there to be able to do that, to be able to control it the same way.
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot. It's like, all I can do is put myself in situations where possibilities can happen and then see where it goes. And that's why I love that you're like one of my few friends who I can say is a stock trader and DJ, because those two things don't normally go together. One of those two things could change your life, or none of them. Or maybe something new, a new rung on the monkey bar will reveal itself through those two things. But like, it's very different than saying, I'm just going to write out my corporate career. I'm going to keep on the track I was and keep doing the thing I knew how to do that I could get a predictable paycheck from.
Although I can't say I don't sometimes look longingly at the grass is greener on the other side version of that. Like, but yeah, no, absolutely. And I struggle with the idea, and you're doing a better job than I am at this. And I think you kind of, the internet now exists as a platform to create your own opportunities. And then at least for me, I mean, I know I'm guilty a little bit of, not always believing that I have the, I'm humble. What can I say? Like, I don't always believe that people are interested in what I have to share, or that I have what it takes to be, sort of a business entity unto myself, and a little bit had the benefit again, like from this planning, these other people would show up and be like, hey, we're doing this. Come on, let's go.
Right.
And,
that's right.
And that I think is, that dynamic doesn't exist the same way as it does. Is sort of you need to drag yourself to the party somehow,
Yeah, because like you didn't set out. There was no plan when you found yourself at the MTV Beach House putting the suntan lotion on supermodels. That was not a plan. That was not like, yo, I'm going to be a music executive and I'm going to go do this and I'm going to get myself an internship at MTV and I'm going to end up hanging out with celebrities and musicians and that's going to lead me to a job at a label and then I'm going to be working with Kanye and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't a plan. It was a series of intentions and interests and passions that led from one rung to the next.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, so like, how do you continue to hold on to that spirit throughout your life? That's the part I'm interested in myself. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. It's like, just get the crayons out again and draw.
Yeah,
just
me too.
Scribble,
It's not always easy. It's not. Yeah.
Because we got responsibilities and kids and, things you got to take care of. And, it's hard, but I honestly believe that the planning fallacy is real. And that if you continue to be locked into that, not just at work, but into your life, and you're afraid to step out in color, like we did when we were, 20 years old and ended up in situations we never thought we'd be in, you get stagnant, you get stuck. And I think that's why a lot of people in their middle ages, especially in their 40s and 50s, get like super depressed. Right?
Yeah. Oh, it's tough. And even, and I would say the one thing that's been gratifying for me a little bit is the DJing, where that would be something that I could easily talk myself out of, or, it's been a really good experience in that way. And sort of, being the creative person that, unlocking that, what's really great about it is playing the records and I really do it just like I used to do in the year 2000 with the same records I played in the year 2000.
I love that.
And, it's amazing. You know, it's like Hot Tub Time Machine or something. You know, you really like it takes me back. And then even I'm not that type of person, so I was, you know, that particular activity. I'm like, okay, let's go. You know, but it would be easy to, I don't know, talk yourself out of it or think that somehow, you know. And I do have other friends who are in my same demographic who are sort of less enthusiastic than I think they could or should be, that used to DJ or, you know, but it's, for me, it's just been that one, just the mechanics of doing it and having it be this thing that I used to do and having it be like a certain type of activity where it's more like being a carpenter or something like that, you know, where you get your tools, you know, I throw them in the back of the Uber, you know, it's like I actually bring the heavy records out like I used to.
Yeah, you got crates.
Well, and a lot of people now, one of the things this is one of those new versus old things I'm struggling with is now everyone plays 45s. So it's much easier to get to the club and it's much easier to bring a lot of records because whereas like the records this size are really, they're heavy and it's a lot. And then that's the one way I think I do, I actually look antiquated because I show up with all the big records, but that's one thing I can't. I enjoy that part of it. Yeah, and it's like heavy and annoying, and you know that feeling like lugging the crates up the stairs at the end of the night. It's something that it just takes me back and makes me feel alive somehow. You know.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't have the answers, but that's one thing that's kept me feeling good and feeling relevant, and even sometimes I've, you know, questioned myself. You know, it's like it's one of those things that's been really like a great experience and a way to get me outside and get in front of other people and meet people. And so I don't have the answers there, but that particular activity, whether it's the stuff they do online or the stuff in the real world, it's something that I get a lot out of. And then struggle now a little bit, like we talked about. You know, I played 2 nights, and then the problem I'm running into is like, you know, it really makes the beginning part of the next day challenging. Like I remember one time, you know, having those, and then back when we worked at Nokia and I was DJing a little bit, I remember really, you know, we have those very early calls, and I remember really struggling, like after the late nights to get up and function. Because
your set's probably going until at least 2, right?
No, that's actually one nice thing that's different in that, like now, and it might be different in different categories, but it used to be play till 4 in the morning, and that was kind of like the regular hours, and people would be out. And now I don't really know that much, and you know, I'm definitely not like a young kid cruising around town at all hours of the night, but everything shuts down earlier, so I'm usually done by midnight everywhere. I mean, like there's no gigs that really, sometimes it might be 1 in the morning if people show up to have some, you know, but it's very much like one thing I think post-COVID, the time frames changed, whereas like before,
interesting. Because New York used to be like all night.
Yeah, and even on weeknights, you know, and again, I don't know too much about how it works the way that it does and why, but there used to be, and I'm sure these things still exist, but there used to be bigger parties on Mondays too, you know, used to be like Monday night parties that would go till 4 in the morning. And, you know, now usually everything's winding down by midnight, especially on the weeknights, you know?
Interesting. Is this all part of that like New York club scene change where everything went to bottle service and like it went from just everybody was equal and open to like the clubs being run more like a business?
You know, I've gotten re-familiarized with that stuff from the stuff that Mark Ronson's been doing where he's like talking on podcasts. So it made me remember that. And that was definitely a thing. And I don't know, you know, it's so funny too, because when he brought that, I was like, oh yeah, that was why DJing became less fun. And it really did, because you wound up having people that would come and, you know, from the DJ's perspective, when that stuff became a bigger thing, there would be the people at the tables with the bottle, and then those people became very important to the business, and then they would come and complain to the DJ. They would, ask for requests or be like, change, I remember that sort of thing where they want like change the vibe, like play house music. They come and tell you to change everything based on what the high roller at the table was like happy or unhappy with.
Spending.
So
yeah, what they wanted.
And then I don't know too much, I think I'm not out that much. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But and then I'm kind of staying in this lane of the vinyl bars and sometimes going to see more like house and techno clubs. But it's definitely, I think the bottle service thing has faded out. And then I think after COVID, my sense of New York City was, and this happened to me too, where during COVID, it got like weird, and it was like a lot of like, I had my kid and my wife and, we had a baby. And so it was very like sort of like internal stuff going on in the house where we were having our little cocoon world together. And then I think even all of us by the end of it, we're just like, okay, enough of this. And then I think everyone in New York, for me, after COVID, like cruising around the streets, you'd be like, wow, it was like completely like Escape from New York or something. Like everything was just, destroyed and empty. And you'd walk down Broadway and every business was boarded up. And then you were like, wow, this is just going to be like it was. Like now we're really going to have fun again. It's going to be like the 90s. Like they kind of cleaned it. They cleaned everybody out and everything was started anew in like a brush fire or something in the old growth forest. And then it got really good. I feel like, this is just my 2 cents on it. There was an amazing moment where it was just like, oh my God, we're back outside. And there's sort of this new freedom that existed that didn't exist under Giuliani. They had the nightlife task force would cruise in, shut down your club and like shine lights in all the bottles to see if there was like fruit flies in the vodka bottle. And I think Eric Adams has a pretty laissez-faire approach to, at one point the tail of New York sort of came back and then it became like a weed theme park. Like it just became, I don't know if you're aware of this or whatever, but there was a point where every store became a weed store. I mean, like up and down my street, there was just like, it was so crazy. Just like a very like weird and unique moment. And then they kind of cleaned that, that was like the undergrowth that grew, the like weed that grew after the for lack of a better, no pun intended, the weeds that grew after the brush fire. And then, now it's sort of getting back to the annoying New York where, it seems like it's very overpriced, very crowded. Everybody's out. And you kind of, we're maybe now hitting the other end of the spectrum where everything's sort of the other end of the pendulum where it seems like we're sort of out of that, like, that very special window where it felt like old New York for a minute. And now we're back to the, $8 matcha crowd with the, and it's good too. I love it here and it's been super fun. I have no complaints, but it's definitely like, I think at the end of that now, for whatever reason, people are not staying out and partying. I think it's drinking too. Like people aren't drinking. Like people for me, at least, if I have a couple of drinks, which I rarely, I can't even drink. But just in general, my perception of time, even if I'm at home, like sitting with my wife on the couch, like watching reality TV, if I have like one White Claw, like all of a sudden, like an hour and a half can go by. Whereas like, do you know what I mean? Like time tends to, you sort of get on a roll and then all of a sudden you can be out later, I think. Whereas like maybe there's just less
drinking.
Like,
so people are staying out less long and
getting like, super drunk just feels, I think, too painful these days. And people are self-medicating other ways. I don't know what it is, but I think that's a factor.
I also think like New York is so expensive. You have to make a shit ton of money to live there. You have to have so much money to live in New York and you got to hustle. You got to work. You got to like, people have to make a lot more money than they used to.
That's too. People doing less creative things. There'd be a lot of other people from entertainment and hospitality. There was a lot more sort of going at just the record business. There were sort of these industry nights that would be on Mondays and Tuesdays. And I'm not sure, those people, it seems like it's been replaced with
it's a different
clientele.
Mindset. Yeah. No, that's interesting. You said you're still playing the records from what you played in the 2000s in the clubs. And I've seen your set online quite a few times. Are you finding that music resonates like as much as it did before. Like most of what I've heard you play is a mix of R&B, disco, and hip hop, and then occasionally you throw in an outlier. But is that what you're playing in the clubs?
Yeah. I mean, that's another reason why I went back and why I didn't play as much is because, I'm not as tuned into new popular music. And I think that,
I feel that.
Again, even with the vinyl too, that's another advantage is that like people know you're limited a little bit in what you can play. And again, I'm sure there's other venues, where people play different stuff. And I think it's, again, like sort of a nice coincidence and sort of that luck thing that we talked about where like it just so happens that everyone's still playing the same records that they were from 2003. And if I was in a situation where people were always asking for new music that I wasn't familiar with, and there are tons of, even like Drake is too new for me, and there's a lot of new music that I'm not as familiar with as I should be, but the vinyl and in general, it's really weird how you can just get away with like literally the exact same records from 2003 and you just show up and play them. And no one, and this is the other weird thing is that the entire time I've been playing, it happened one time where someone asked for Doja Cat, but no one has ever come to me and been like, do you have this or that, and have it be some new music that, no one comes up and is like, oh, do you have Sabrina Carpenter? Or do you have Charlie XCX? No one ever asked for anything new. No one cares. And it's, again, just something where it's like, get in where you fit in. It's like, oh, great, I can do this. And,
right.
And everyone's feeling.
Do you think that's the venues are playing that?
Yeah.
Is that the venue, or is it that like, it's just that, because the first thing that came to my mind is, what is it about this music that is so timeless that younger people, way younger than us, are still listening to it and not asking to hear the stuff that's, quote, their contemporaries? Because I think back, like, go back to the 90s, early 90s or whatever, we would never have been to a club and been like, yo, can you play the Rolling Stones? Or can you play, maybe something like James Brown or Chic or whatever would hold up, but nobody would be wanting to hear music from the 60s and 70s in a club.
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's because that music hasn't stayed as just music in general, right? It's become, there's just a bunch of different dynamics. One would sort of be like the way that the business of music has evolved, and the way that there isn't as much sort of focus on making big records and all the money and time and energy that would go into like making the big record and then making that big record big. And then it's something that people care about, right? And then on the other hand, there's this other dimension of people have this ability to kind of explore whatever music that they want. So they're not as locked in to the big record. And then there's less of an incentive to make them. So there are fewer big records that people care about. And then they're freed up to look at lots of different types of music. And then, so you can play I don't know if this is a phenomenon that I've seen lately that I'm not as in touch with as I would be if I still worked in that business. But I think there's a lot of old catalog stuff that's showing up on the charts now. Yeah. So, it's even replacing some of the music that's on the charts. And so I think that there's that one, less big records, less people checking for the big records, more bandwidth for people to go and explore different kinds of music. And then when you go in as the DJ, you're not as restricted because you don't have to worry about thong song and playing it five.
Right.
There was a moment where it's like thong song. You need to play Cisco thong song many times. And if you don't, you might as well go home. Empty. You're going to hear people are going to complain. They're going to start throwing drinks at you. It's not like that. And then you have the ability, because it's not like that, you have all those slots freed up. And then you can kind of go in different directions. So you have more flexibility. People are going to complain less, and then people are more open at the same time. So, you kind of do more and get away with more than you would have been able to in the past. And then the audience is not as focused as complaining about how many times they hear the thong song, but they're equally as they want to be taken on a bit of a journey and shown some new things because that's similar to their experience when they consume music on their own. So, you know, but it's funny, some spots, you know, the one thing I would say that's sort of in that more constrained area is that one of the spots I play, you know, they really want the 2000s hip hop and R&B. And so some audiences really want that stuff. And then not so much like the disco and the classics, you know, and then other spots where it's really more these like the higher end vinyl bars, you know, they really want you to come in and really just do what you want and play lots of different music. And even the way that distribution works where, you know, whereas there's a lot of black music that I wasn't even able to access where I grew up. That problem doesn't exist. So everyone has access to everything. And then there's also great records. Like this isn't such a good example, but there's a record, James Mason, that like, I think it's called James Mason, but like, it's like $500, you know? And again, that's one of those ones where we don't need to worry about why is it $500? It doesn't matter. It's super good. And like, people pay $500 for it. And it's amazing. And then I saw like a festival recently. Well, one thing's for sure is it's $500 because it sold far fewer copies than Michael Jackson Thriller. So it's just something that was scarce and amazing. And I think he's in the Roy Ayers band, if you know who Roy Ayers is. He's another guy that like, you know, again, I only became aware of when I left the Midwest, but has all this incredible music that now people are up on. And then James Mason is like another tier down where he's like in that group, but the record's $500. But now he's able to headline festivals because YouTube and they surface all these Japanese city pop and all these things that are really obscure that become more or as popular as they deserve to be, but because of the, you know, luck involved with the way that things worked in the music business and the challenges of, you know, especially an album like that James Mason record, like you can see why it's not Michael Jackson's Thriller, but it's incredible. And so there's a lot of records like that I think used to be more off the beaten path, but now the algorithm has sort of put those things back in their rightful place in the hierarchy. So you can come in as the DJ and tap into some of that and throw people curveballs in a way that you couldn't in the past.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's really cool. Are you still doing the live sets on Twitch and Instagram and stuff?
Yeah, I'm supposed to do that right now, actually. I'm supposed to
All right. We'll have to wrap in a minute and let you go do that. But I
don't mind. Yeah, I didn't do it this week because I was in these webinars. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of. And then I'm actually going to start to think about what I'm going to play some classics and say, you know, the thing that I do next Wednesday is really the fun spot where they have really nice sound system and nice setup. Yeah, it's really great. You know, like big wooden speakers and big monitors and a nice big mixer and. So I really like to go in there and try and in fact, the last time I went there, I played more house and I feel like that was a tiny bit of a mistake. So this time I'm going to really think hard about what I'm going to go in there and play and use today to kind of come up with. Yeah, just really, I feel like that's a spot where, you know, I've been so caught up with the other spot I play regularly. They really want the early hip hop, the golden era hip hop and R&B. And I love to play those records and, some things I like better than others, and some things I'm playing because I know that's what the crowd wants, especially with the hip hop. Because sometimes I'm too close to it a little bit. Sometimes, you know, like even Jay-Z is a perfect example, who's phenomenal and has a million records that work great. You know, like he was my boss, and you know, sometimes you know he has like a certain way of presenting the information in his songs and stuff that's kind of like telling you how great he is, which is true. There's nothing, you can't take anything away from his greatness, but he's like a rapper who's his archetype is sort of showing and demonstrating to you like, I'm the man. And, you know, when he was your boss and you need to play like 20 records listening to that all night, it's not always what you want to, you know?
Yeah.
So I've had to like overcome some of my own personal, PTSD from working in that business to play some of those records. Whereas if I go back to the the classics and the funky records. I don't have any.
No scar tissue.
Exactly. No personal experiences or ups and downs with any of those people.
Yeah.
And not that working with Jay-Z wasn't incredible. He's an incredible guy, but there's definitely like a certain part of me that's like, oh, here's this guy again telling us how spectacular he is.
Did you work with Kanye through Jay-Z, or did that happen in a different way?
No, he was signed to Roc-A-Fella.
He was signed to Roc-A-Fella, so you like work with him through when your time at Roc-A-Fella.
But he was, well, yeah. And then, but at that particular time, you know, the way that things were structured, yeah, we could have a whole separate long conversation about just, you know, what Roc-A-Fella was like and what Kanye meant at that time, and sort of in the context of rap music and how things were set up at Roc-A-Fella. Like he was sort of, what would be the word for it? Like, I want to say he was sort of like the nerd, but that doesn't really actually capture it. You know what I mean? But like these other guys were a certain way, like the way that Jay-Z is, where he's sort of demonstrating to you, you know, all the things that he has, and the girls and the cars and the ability to hustle and generate revenue, on and on. And Kanye was something like completely different. So at that point in time, a lot of the other artists were cut from the same cloth, and you know, talking about a certain lifestyle and things that Kanye wasn't really connected to. So when he came, there was a long period of time where, you know, there was a lot of opportunities to get stuff done with him because he had great, you know, and then for me personally and other people who came from that more, you know, Tribe Called Quest and all, you know, it was just instantly something that resonated with me. And so there was a period of time where he was just kind of a guy hanging out and wanting to do stuff, and actually was also super tuned into the internet in a way that the other artists weren't. So there was this really special period of time where he had these special records. Other people in the office hadn't quite figured out yet how special he was. And he was a little bit less difficult to deal with, and but still a genius. And there was like this window where we were able to run around with him and really had a special time getting stuff done with him, where not everyone else was paying attention, but you saw the opportunity, and it was like, I'm going to take this ball and run with it. And then quickly everybody else found the ball and then he started putting the ball in the basket, and the rest is history, you know.
Took everything in a different direction.
And then a whole different direction again after that. Like once he won the championship, he's like, okay, now for my next act, watch what I'm going to do.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy who does not live the planning fallacy, that's for sure. He's all over the place with his directional changes and shifts. He's a guy who lives through himself in good ways and bad ways.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much of a contingency plan in place.
Yeah.
But
I don't think
an example of a guy, and Jay-Z is the same way, where, you know, again, this is maybe a good way to end our chat, is that, you know, it's and this is something I've learned so much from, like Jay-Z as a person to work for and be around. You know, his mentality is that of a hustler, and he's hustling and taking it. That means sort of like also staying in motion, but also taking advantage. And I don't know how, you know, what your background's like, but I'm not a hustler. And so I learned a lot from being around him and seeing how people like that move and operate. And then again, yeah, I'm sure, you know, at that point, like they're not thinking as much about planning fallacy and contingency planning. And Kanye is the same way. And they both sort of wound up in different places. But there is, and this I struggle with right now, you know, sort of how to be more like Jay-Z, but also make sure I don't wind up in the dark place that things that you can when things go wrong, you know?
Right. Yeah. I guess, you know, there's Jay-Z is Jay-Z. He's got his own thing. He is, you know, as he put it, I'm not a businessman. I am a businessman. You know, he is a business. And I think it takes a certain type of brain to think and operate that way. And the key is finding your version of that, right? What's your way of being a business, right?
Yeah.
What's your way of finding your way through that, you know? Because he came from different roots. He has a different brain. He's wired a different way. But there is definitely things to take away from him. There's definitely lessons to learn. But it's like, how do you apply that pattern back to yourself? And most of all, how do you just keep experimenting until you find that thing that hits?
Yeah, he's definitely, you know, we talked a little bit about some of the ups and downs of leaders in different organizations.
Yeah.
And he's unique. There's no other. He's completely cut from a different cloth entirely, and his approach to leading and being a boss and being a businessman, and like he's an enigma wrapped in a mystery. He is, but he's one person who, you know, I'm sure we probably can both think of people who we were somewhat not always impressed by, right? Let's put it that way. Not everyone is always impressive in these leadership roles, and yeah, exactly. Like, I can't always understand how he's moving and operating, but he was always never not impressive. You know what I mean? Like
right.
And you know, Kanye was always sort of exposing his inner unimpressed, you know, which again, just being very authentic in a way that wasn't always impressive, but was very authentic and real. And I think that, who knows how that's morphed in a way that's not always so positive at this point. But there was a time when that vulnerability from him was refreshing. And also at the same time, in the context of that environment where Jay-Z is the boss, it was challenging. You know what I mean? I
can only imagine.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting.
Those two are so completely contrasting, you know, like I think back to we actually had a conversation about this the day after it happened, to the VMAs, when Kanye ran up and took the microphone from Taylor Swift. And when they gave the award to Beyonce, they were, you know, to Taylor instead of Beyonce for best video. And, you know, he was just like, no, I gotta, let me say something or whatever. I can't remember his word was. I gotta interrupt you or something like that. And I was just like, man, what the hell's going on with this guy? What are you thinking? You're like, you told me, you know, you don't know Kanye. Like, that's totally him. That's just him being him.
Well, the first one was the George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Well, that was
before. And that was one of those days where you went into work the next day. That was like, you know, in a way, like, you know, he's such an innovative guy. And like that moment in itself, like kind of points towards the future in a way that no one, including him, I think, could understand at the time, right? Like, that's really sort of the beginning of the unraveling of the sort of norms that exist in our society, that, like, and thinking back on it that time, like, that was such a controversial thing that he did. But now it's sort of, that'd be like 3 things like that happen before 10:45 on a Tuesday every day.
Yeah. No, that's true, man. Well, good. No, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. And I think, you know, that's the whole point of what I'm trying to do. Just have conversations with people who are walking their own path, trying to figure out, you know, what do I need to keep doing? What do I need to do less of? What do I need to do more of? And for me, the big takeaway from this conversation was like, the best things often happen to us when we're not trying to make them happen. When we're just being ourselves, experimenting, going rung to rung, you know, trying to be in the right places at the right time, and then just letting the universe take over. Sometimes that's the best way to do it. The plan isn't always the plan. So you keep trading and you keep DJing, and God knows what'll come out of that. But at least you're doing something.
Yeah, exactly. We're here. It's a beautiful day, you know, and yeah, no, I appreciate the time too. And I certainly don't have, I wish I had more of a clear sort of, you know, path towards the you know, the road to riches or something like that. I'm still,
there's nothing we need to teach
on down the, you know, like making my own way down the yellow brick road here, you know, towards the.
That's the lesson. It's always our own way down the road, and there is no path, but you got to reach for something bigger, or else you don't end up anywhere, you know.
Word. Exactly. Yes.
All right, brother. Thank you so much.
That's something that we could all agree on, right? Kanye, me, you, Jay-Z, we're all on that same.
Everybody's on that same thread. Yeah. That's what I want to spread, is like, you know, it's funny how many people today, with all we know about success, still think the answer is go to Stanford, get a job at McKinsey, get a job at Google, go from, individual contributor to manager to director to VP, and that's it. That is a path. And don't get me wrong, there are people who've made a lot of money doing that, but that is not the right path for everybody. Can you imagine Jay-Z in that path? Can you imagine Kanye in that path? No, they never would have been who they are.
I'm not sure. I think those paths are less well trodden than they were. I think that those paths are a little bit less available than they were in the past. And then there's other pathways that open up as an alternative. And that's where I think I want to live, right? And I'm still struggling to figure out the exact door to open or close to get there. But yeah, they exist, and it's really the same technology that got us excited in the first place that's going to lead us there, I think.
That's right. All right, man. Well, with that, go spin some records on Instagram. I'll see you over there.
Yeah, I'll see you there. All right. Thanks.
All right, brother. Take care.
The steeper path, the climb I choose, leaving comfort, nothing to lose. Through shadow trails and rocky ground, my purpose clear, my meaning found. Each step I take brings strength anew. Challenges faced, resilience grew. A journey tough, but richly sweet, where soul and life's alignment meet. At peaks ahead, the vision clear, my greatest goals becoming near. The steeper path, though hard and slow, is where my truest self